I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 135 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob Pondillo and I interview an anonymous guest who chose to go by the name Homo Sapien. He's 52 years old, pretty much a lifelong atheist. He's Canadian, and yet he still isn't out of the closet as non-religious. This conversation is not about our usual subject, which is the trauma of leaving one's faith, but it is about the toxic effects that religion has on society as it suppresses curiosity, creativity, and personal accountability. Mr. Sapien is a brilliant thinker and a great conversationalist. So Bob and I have a great time. This type of episode is as close as we're ever going to get to a Sam Harris type podcast. Before we get into our talk with Homo, I want to read a couple of emails that came this week. I get a lot of emails each week, like these, and I apologize that some get read and some don't, and I don't really have an explanation as to what ones get picked and what don't. It's certainly not on their criteria. It has a lot to do with the timing of what I have to say, and I was really frustrated this week. I attempted to write several monologues, and I hated them all. So it's not just a filler. These are actually really good emails, and they all came in the last 2 days, and so they're fresh on my mind. So it's just all about timing. The first one is from Matt Schmidt. He writes, Cass, I just wanted to write a quick email to you about your podcast. I've only been listening for about 6 to 8 months now, but I have found myself connecting to so many of your guests' experiences. I'm currently in the process of deconstructing myself and have been traveling through this new world for just over a year. I started my church experience in the belly of my mother and have been a part of a church for over 40 years. As I listen to the many life stories told on your show, there have been many occasions that someone expressed a feeling of confusion, followed by an anger of betrayal by the narrative of Christianity, which we have taken to accept as reality, or even a newfound freedom from the release of all the human-designed rules and constraints Christianity has taught us our whole lives. I cannot thank you enough for creating this vehicle to provide reassurance that we are not alone in this process, and the feeling and experiences we are going through are not unique. Everyone has a story. Keep up the good work. Matt Schmidt. And I specifically like, you know how emails you have signatures, right? He has an Albert Einstein quote that I think is really good. And we never know if these are truly, if Albert Einstein really said this or not. But in the meantime, it's really good. Quote, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. Unquote. Albert Einstein. This next email was written by a woman who wants to remain anonymous. Dear Cass and Bob, I just wanted to send you guys an email to thank you for your wonderful work I can't tell you how much it has helped me come to terms with my own godlessness amongst the deeply Christian community in which I live. See, I grew up Catholic, and it wasn't until about 6 months ago that I finally acknowledged the fact that I was agnostic, and likely had been my whole life. Now I'm 19 and living with my parents, who are going through deaconate training, becoming increasingly more theological by the day. They don't know that I no longer subscribe to the belief that there is any God, let alone the Christian God, that is just waiting to send me to hell for being queer. So I listen to your podcast to and from church every Sunday to distract me from the situation. Please know that it genuinely helps with the feeling of loneliness that comes with being the only atheist in a church, and I don't know if I would still be sane without it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Kind regards, Anonymous. P.S. If you guys ever want an interview with a queer ex-Catholic college student who is still going to a very southern Texas church with a future deacon father, let me know. I would be happy to throw my 2 cents into the immeasurable amount of advice and experience your podcast has put into the world. Unquote. We taped this conversation on December 4th, 2016. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight and not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show's available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website at everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. My wife may be able to go back to college. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode is called Reasons and was created by friend of the show, the Barry Orchestra, B-A-R-R-Y, found at barryorchestra.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. So without further ado, this is our talk with Homo Sapien, a mutual friend of our dear friend up in Canada, a friend of the show who has promoted our podcast everywhere he goes. Bob Barnes is a dear, dear friend of the show. He's taken Bob and I to dinner. He's passed EA podcast business cards out at the Reason Rally. He's a great guy, and he introduced us to our guest today. And this is a really good talk. I think you're going to enjoy it. Here's our talk with what I call Dr. Homo Sapien.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, super duper. All right, hold on a second here, Gabe. We'll see what's up. This is Bob, by the way, Matt.
Strange. I know you guys. I feel like I know you guys better than I know most of my close personal friends, given all the things I've heard you talk about.
Oh.
So.
Well, yeah. Thank you, I guess.
I think my wife is probably, people have told me that I'm an open book and I could be a little less open book.
Okay. Very true. Very true.
Well, I think one of the things that I think is that I spent most of my life being ashamed of being human, and I'm just out and proud.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. Well, there's so much of what you guys talk about and what you put out there that I relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's an awful lot of people like me. But, locally and actually meeting people face to face and having meaningful discussions is really tough when you're an atheist.
Very true.
Right.
Very true.
Yeah, I was speaking of out and proud. One of the reasons that so go back to how you and I met. Bob Barnes is a mutual friend of ours.
Right. Great guy.
Yeah, actually, we're likely to. You guys are essentially acting at this point as partly as my therapists. So
okay.
My hope is that this discussion will be anonymous. So
yes, that's right. Lay on the couch.
Okay, you want to go anonymous?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so
sure.
have we said his name yet?
I don't know. Well, if we did, we'll cut it out. What should we call you?
You had a previous guest that went by Hugh Mann.
Oh yeah.
I like the idea of going as Homo Sapien.
Okay. So we're going to call you Homo Sapien.
Call you Homo.
Shout out to the LGBT community, and then also a hardcore belief in evolution.
Okay.
All right, good. So Mr. Sapien is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right.
I don't think we did say his name, but I mean, obviously, if I did, I'll take it out.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I guess Bob Barnes is not anonymous, and
Nope.
Are you in Canada?
We are in southwestern Ontario, yes.
Yeah.
And that'll come out, I think, in a lot of the stories I'm likely to tell.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're 52. What's your actual birthday?
December 18th, coming up.
Oh, coming up.
Happy
yeah.
birthday to you.
And you'll be
Thank you
53.
much. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can relate to the culture that I grew up in then.
Absolutely. As long as the Canadian culture and the American culture have some
Yeah,
overlap,
pretty much. There's some cultural differences, but not too. Yeah, pretty much. The West.
A great deal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you speak French?
Oui, oui.
Mon français est très terrible.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
Something about where's the table? What did you say?
My French is terrible.
Oh, my French is terrible.
That's what he said. Okay, terrible table. You got something out of that.
I got some. That's right.
Actually, I think the literal translation would be my French is very bad.
Oh, okay.
Same
okay.
as.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, so Mr. Sapien, Homo. We, as you know, you've listened to the show. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. And we often start with just the religious background of their childhood.
Yeah. So Greta Vosper is involved with the United Church of Canada.
Yeah, we love Greta.
Yeah, so do I, actually. And then the interview you did with her, and I even started perusing through some of her books in the library a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's the faith tradition that I was raised in.
Okay.
Neither of my parents are overtly religious. As a matter of fact, I think we had to go to Sunday school as kids, but I don't remember how old we were when the choice was left up to us to not go, and we all just said, no, we're not going.
Right. Now, that's the United Church of Canada, right?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And it's got a reputation of being very liberal. However,
Well,
it's interesting that each denomination is actually left a great deal, each congregation has left a great deal of flexibility in terms of how they work within that church.
Yeah.
So you can find some, like Greta, who are like out and out atheist. But I went to a wedding at a United Church in Calgary a couple of years ago, and it felt like I was in hardcore fundamentalist territory. So.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so with your parents and your childhood, is it kind of a social thing, right? Everybody goes, or at least this is something to do for society or something?
Well, so I have two children. My children are 9 and 10, and we adopted them from the local Children's Aid Society 7 years ago or so.
Okay.
And this is part of why I'm going through some of the things I'm going through now versus when I lost my faith. But the Ontario Education Act, the law that dictates how education will be provided in the province, has I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but the duties of a teacher require them to inculcate a respect for religion and Judeo-Christian morality.
Mm-hmm.
So, in 63, when I was born, and then therefore going to school in late 60s, early 70s, you wanted to join Cub Scouts, you had to give oath to the God, and we sang God Save the Queen and recited the Lord's Prayer every day when I was in grade school. And quite clearly, the societal message from just about everywhere you turned was that, if you didn't believe in God, there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so it's a lot like America, really. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, although maybe not as fundamentalist or evangelical in nature, but there are pockets of that.
But it just being the hegemonic norm to be a Christian and to everybody believes, and this is the water we're swimming in. It's just,
absolutely, yeah. So you learn, and maybe even more so as a Canadian, I think you're just trying to get along, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have our belief in free speech, I don't think, is enshrined as rigidly in the law as yours is, but it's sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of went along, didn't really think about it a whole lot, I guess, as a teen. In my early 20s, was probably depressed and interested in a girl, and you know how that story works out. She's involved in religion, so I kind of got trapped in that for a few months before I just said, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
A few months. So your stint with Christianity, with at least aggressive Christianity, was a few months before you said, nah.
Correct, but it was very, very much what I imagine the Southern American Christian experience. You know, giving your life over to Jesus and praying all the time, and basically giving up your agency. And that's, I think, probably at its core the part I had the hardest time with, was like, look, this just doesn't. I couldn't have rationalized the cognitive dissonance, but it was there enough that it just made me say, nah, I don't think this is for me.
Sure.
Wonderful. Applause.
Yeah.
You saved yourself a whole lot of heartache.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Because all that did was keep me from getting sucked into that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But so, you know, that's how many years ago? That's 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now you fast forward through the rest of my life, and you've still got this deep-seated idea that was planted in your brain before you were practically able to speak, certainly before you were able to think for yourself about, you know, God being good and Jesus loves you and all that kind of stuff. And that if you don't go along with that, you're going to be an outcast and everything else. I think that's probably a story that a lot of people who don't identify as particularly religious can relate to. Is just, you know, I don't care, and why would I bother somebody if, you know, why would I say something against somebody else's religion if I don't need to cause that trouble? And that's the way I lived most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back into a story, the whole adoption bit. We, my wife and I, in our 40s, decided to start a family. And at that age, probably makes more sense to adopt than to take some of the risks associated with biological birth. So we started down that path, and we're looking at international adoption. And of course, you got to get a home study done and go through that whole process. So we did that, and we found an agency. And it turns out, I found out after the fact, that if you wanted to adopt domestically with this agency, you would have had to have signed a statement of faith. Very much a Christian organization. However, for some reason, to adopt internationally, you don't. And then when you go through the home study, they ask you, you know, detailed questions about your religious beliefs. And I always felt uncomfortable about that.
Sure.
And I think I figured out why just more recently. And the Pew Research study that talks about morality, Americans, about 50% of people believe you need to have a belief in God in order to have morality.
A basis for morality,
Yeah, and in Canada, that number is closer to a third. But if you're answering questions like this for an adoption home study, and the person who reads this home study is going to determine whether or not you're going to be a suitable family for an adoptive child, and they happen to be one of those 50% or 30%, that's the part I think that really doesn't seem right to me. Because choosing to be an atheist, as you guys have talked over and over again, and many of your guests, we all agree that there's no real connection there. We wouldn't have survived as a species if we didn't have empathy and compassion. So,
Sure, right.
So that just is a ridiculous argument that you know, you have to have some kind of religious ties to be moral.
Yeah, I sat across the Starbucks table with a friend who solicited me. You know, he's an old Christian friend, and he said, "Hey, let's get coffee." And I'll never turn down. Well, I will sometimes, but
If it's free coffee,
yeah,
there.
well, it wasn't free. I paid for it, but anyway, I was sitting across from him, and he went down that path of, like, you know, basis for morality, and I'm so done with that I just said, all right, you mean to tell me that if you didn't find it in a text that you wouldn't know right from wrong?
Exactly.
And he kind of looked at me sideways, you know, like, you know, and I want people to see how insulting that sounds and is.
It is, yeah. And so, you know, we've been raising our children for 7 years now, and they've gone from the age of 2 and 3 to 9 and 10. And we're very much a secular atheist household, and like, they know right from wrong.
Yeah.
It's not.
But for that adoption agency to have that kind of power. Now, is that a private sector company, or was that a
It would have
Canadian?
been.
Yeah, it was private,
It
so they can
was.
do that. But At least in American, they can do that if they're private. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, that you roll the dice of getting a fundamentalist as the guy or the man or woman who gets to sign the line or say yay or nay, and that's a lot of power to be wielding, and then to bring in your religious filter, your religious tests.
Yeah. What did you do anyway?
Yeah. Did you lie to him?
Well, no. I at the time, I remember my wife and I were on vacation, and one of our goals on the vacation was to write all this stuff up. And I've always been an avid reader and interested in ontological questions and so on. And my answer came down to, all the world's great religions and philosophies have something significant to offer us, and they have an awful lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
And, beyond that, I don't really have much to say.
What about your wife? Is
kind of
she
a bullshit answer. I get it. Yeah.
Well, that's not bullshit. That's actually true.
It's true. I know.
That's the way you feel.
It's just not. It's not very concrete. That's all.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it is a vague answer.
Right.
But you feel that way about religion.
Well, yeah, for the most part. I mean, there are things in all religions that are interesting, just like in books or magazines or, ancient texts from the Bronze Age.
Yeah, but the
like
fact that
Greek stuff.
The fact that Homo here emphasized the similarities.
Yes, Mr. Sapien, of course.
Then that diminishes the uniqueness of each one, which is what he was simultaneously doing. He's being honest, and he's saying, I acknowledge the power over society and the influence that religion has had over the formation of the Homo sapiens.
Yes.
And our cultures. And they have a lot of similar things to say. We're both acknowledging and minimizing religion.
Yeah, I think
that's a good answer. So is your wife religion, or is she have any religious past? Or
she was actually raised in the same church I was, and I think if you were to go back 7 or 8 years and ask her what her religion was, she'd say Christian. But she's certainly not, that's more of a cultural answer than a. Today, I think, given all the stuff that I've spewed and annoyed her with about atheism, I think she'd probably come out closer to where I'm at. But today it's not much of an issue, other than I'm like you, Cass. I just have this preoccupation with understanding it, and and that annoys her a little bit. But I don't think she disagrees with the ideas I've got. Yeah,
or your conclusions. No, it definitely annoys my wife. Oh my gosh! I mean, it comes to a head every now and then, where she's sick and tired of the podcast, or she's sick and tired of hearing me talk about this or whatever. And we're 30 years in, so I mean, it's like, this is who I am, babe. So Yeah,
I don't think none of this is a surprise to her.
No, right?
So it's just okay. Move on.
So would you say that for you, all right, so let's say in culture, there is a group here in Murfreesboro that are Coffee Lovers Anonymous or Coffee Lovers Incorporated, and it's just a little fun stitch and bitch, group where people get together and shoot the shit, and the common denominator is their love for coffee.
Right.
And we would never, as fellow citizens with those people, get all in their business with, you guys aren't supposed to be meeting, or you guys need to shut up, or we need to silence your group or whatever, because they are benign. They are they're nothing, and they're not hurting anyone. And so I think maybe the way I'm hearing you is that growing up and well into your 20s, 30s, even 40s, maybe didn't see religion as something to take up arms against or make a big deal out of, and until what? I mean, is there a point in which you felt like, this hegemonic, overpowering, overreaching influence needs to be stopped, or at least impeded?
Yes. So I think the first real tweak in all that would have been 9/11.
Yep.
So I remember standing in my kitchen looking at the TV when George Bush was, I believe he was speaking to Congress and talking about what the response to 9/11 was going to be. And he said a lot of things, much of which I normally don't agree with what he says. But the one thing he came out with was, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. And I didn't, it wasn't even conscious, but I swore at the TV. It's like, I've thought a lot about why my reaction was so visceral, and like, you're not even leaving room for another opinion. You're not like that. and then we ended up with a prime minister who was very much a hardcore Christian as well, Stephen Harper. And he periodically he's very sharp and would know how to not get over the line and really stir people up. But there were themes in the messages he'd come out with that were very much in line with the way George Bush would think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the start of it is, here George Bush is, when he was elected, people thought, okay, he's a compassionate Christian and all that. There's a big thread of that within the American population, so it's not out of the norm.
Thread,
but then,
as in THREAD.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the comedians made fun of him for the first several months when he was in power until 9/11 happened, and because he was, characterized as sort of bumbling and not great with his words and so on.
Sure.
And then 9/11 happens, and the response is this massive military stir everything up in the Middle East and in an area where religion is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
He at least tried with the words he came out with to make it clear to the American public and to the world that this was not a religious war.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure that your new guy understands or appreciates how
Mr.
important
Trump.
that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand anything.
There's a real danger there in this
bet.
becoming an out-and-out boiling religious war, which just is a real frightening scenario for me. But anyway, so 9/11 is sort of the start of it, and really get me thinking. Did a lot of reading about different points of view. Steve Cole, C-O-L-L. I'm not sure what his primary job is, but he's written a number of books. One called Ghost Wars, which is the history of Afghanistan, and another one called the Bin Ladens, which really gets deep into the history of the family and so on. And those are good kind of backgrounders if you want to fill in a lot of blanks about how Afghanistan got to be what it was.
Okay, so I need some clarification because, and this is such a nuanced subject. I mean, whether 9/11 and all that's going on, how religious is it, how political is it, and the nuance there. So what I hear you saying that you appreciated it when Bush basically said this is not a religious war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. I think I don't know how true he was being when he, how honestly he feels that, but I think that's an important aspect of this. That in the end, the actions that were taken have, in my opinion, just made things vastly worse.
Oh, well, of course, yeah. That was a giant mistake, and we're still paying for it. But so I guess where I'm going and what I'm trying to get clarification on in your mind, and this comes out in the Sam Harris stuff, and as far as people like Obama won't say the words Islamic radicals or something like he won't.
Islamic terrorists.
He's trying to put a barrier between just broad brushing all Islamists as terrorists or as violent or as extreme.
Right.
And what's it like 1.6 billion or something, and a very small percentage are radical. And yet, every one of these acts, including ISIS or whatever, at least lip service wise, they claim to be doing it in the name of Allah and Islam. And so, so where do you come out on all that?
I'm probably in exactly the same place you guys are, given all I've heard you discuss and say on the numerous podcasts I've listened to.
But I don't know that we have. I don't know that we have voiced a very strong position, and that is like, I guess what I'm coming down to is where you land on the word Islamophobia, because that seems to be the divisive word.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much difference between somebody who wants to bomb an abortion clinic because of their religious Christian beliefs than somebody who wants to fly a plane into the World Trade Center. They're both driven by ideologies that are violent and extremist, and that's the part we got to get rid of. We got to get rid of the fundamentalist in everything, not just religion, but in politics and in economics. People have to be willing to say sometimes, I've learned something, and I'm going to change my opinion, or I don't know, let me learn some more, rather than just saying I know the answer right off the bat.
There you go. So now we're nailing down, really, now you're talking in our language, because this is why we started the show, not only just to help individual people on their individual journey, but to get the whole world to start backing the fuck off of certainty. No matter where it shows up, like you just said.
Yeah.
So we're all born, and who knows where the nature nurture stuff comes into this.
Sure.
But I have been thinking a lot lately that I just ended up somehow with an oversupply of empathy, compassion, and a desire to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And those are three things that, like, that's basically the fuel behind my why I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And then people like Silverman and Dawkins and Hitchens and all that, they just kind of, and podcasts like yours, when I started to realize that there are a lot of other people out there who think the way I do, and there's a lot of good reasons to not be quiet about it. I don't want to just, be quiet and let the hegemony take its course. Somebody has to eventually start standing up for this stuff, and they have to do it intelligently and rationally and show that we're good people too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's what helped the LGBT movement. We always go back to this. That
Very true.
what really helped them get their equal rights moving along is more and more people could say, "I know one."
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so much
yourself.
it's so much harder to demonize the mysterious other when you actually are friends with one down the street, or a neighbor, or you work with one, and you're like, yeah, they're not so bad. I guess they do kind of deserve the same rights as me. Duh.
So are you familiar with Oliver Stone's Untold History of the United States?
I've seen several episodes of it. Yeah.
It's worth watching because it ties a whole bunch of political and historical stuff together in a way that unless you're really looking for it, you wouldn't see it. There's discussions about the use of nuclear weapons at the end of the Second World War that I see in a different light now because of that. But that whole period, post-war, the godless communists, there was everything in society, atheism or godlessness had all these negative things attached to it unfairly, and I don't know what the right answer is to how you detach those now, because I look at somebody who chooses not to believe in supernatural stuff because they've done the work of figuring out what science can tell us, and they're comfortable with some of the answers to questions that we don't know yet. Those are the people I respect the most.
Sure.
Like they're intelligent, they're
humble,
willing to exactly. There was a discussion on Twitter this week about somebody saying they wanted atheists to be more humble, and ultimately it came down to, for me, is well, I'm here because of science, and science has humbleness built in. It's like it assimilates new knowledge and is more than happy and willing to change its conclusions based on that. There's nothing more humble than that.
Yeah, I always wonder about that too. Why do people think that you have to be a statue, and how you know what I mean, and how you approach a question? I mean, the more information we have, the more we should be able to go, oh, well, that's wrong, this is right. At least for now, in the momentary fact of the matter, we know what's up. But this notion of you can't change your mind is like nutty.
Oh, I see. Yeah, just cement it in. Yeah. Well, that's fundamentalism. That's
and
what we're talking
politics
about.
do that all the time around here too.
Well, think about prayer. I think Greta Vosper, in her response to your interview with your good friend that
Hunter,
Hunter McFarlane, the idea that consolation is real, even if ultimately its source is not, is valid. So I do believe that people get a lot out of prayer.
Yeah.
So I know a guy who was on his deathbed, had a major health crisis, and there was something on the web set up where people could go and send their good wishes, and this guy's very religious, and like I was the only guy there who said, kudos to the doctors and the medical profession for being able to stand in and save this guy's life. And I was like the only guy in this sea of we're praying for you, and it's a good thing you got the I felt so strange that
I do that too. I do that too. Of course, Greta was the one that said if you feel uncomfortable saying, well, what about the doctors? Say, I'm holding you gently in my heart, or something like that. Some, kind of BS kind of thing.
Well, we're learning verbiage.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I'm not uncomfortable saying it.
No.
It just seems weird to me that
we're the minority.
Yeah.
That so many people could be so disconnected from the reality of what actually happened here.
Right. Yeah, it's this sense that, you can say a prayer and in fact, we had these terrible fires a month or so ago in Tennessee. And one of the city officials stood up and said, the only thing you can do now is pray for us. And I'm thinking, well, what about the firemen? I mean, how about that? Bring more water. That would be helpful.
Go donate blood or something.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back and address this arrogance thing. When people say, I wish atheists were less arrogant or were more humble, it's like, that's so maddening. And then what Bob said about, the humility, I think one of the things that we hate about science when they use the word theory, the theory of evolution.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and Christians take that and run because they just
think it's a guess.
Yeah, but here's what's ironic about that is that I think science uses the word theory on purpose as a placeholder, temporary, and as a humble reference. Mm-hmm. So it's like a beautiful thing that we call it the theory of gravity or the theory of evolution, is that's how humble we are.
Well, I like to spin that around the other way and say that the products of science are established scientific facts. And by calling it a scientific fact, you're saying, okay, when somebody comes along with a better explanation, that's going to be the one that we go with.
Yeah.
Right.
But they are facts that we base decisions on and live our lives by from here on until we get a better answer.
Yeah.
So, that theory thing is just so... Like, what are we, 10?
Well, and here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing about that is that we realize that even if it's 99% fact, then we but we're not going to stop living or stop acting based on those things. And so, until it's been proved upon, we might as well treat it as a fact because it's the best we know right now, and we have to turn around and live our lives.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's the best we can do for now.
Yeah,
and get on with it. Yeah, you're right.
I'm feeling a similar thing with this passivity and this abandonment. What is it when you forfeiture of this guy that says, "Well, all we can do now is pray." It's like, no, we have to live. The fire's burning. Grab a bucket, goddammit. I mean,
we got to make the world a better place to live in. So when the Orlando shootings happened at the Pulse nightclub, there was a Twitter hashtag pray for Orlando, and somebody responded and said, prayers aren't working. That makes so much sense. Like, go do something else. Go donate blood. Go donate money. Go volunteer at the soup kitchen. Go do something for society because it'll make you feel better.
I think socially, I think that impetus, the Orlando shooting and that hashtag was the first time that I'd ever seen a fairly large public pushback.
I agree with you, and it felt good.
So there was pushback against that.
Well, as far as, the guy that went in there and shot everybody was a prayer. Yeah. He was a man of prayer.
Right.
And he, it's like not only did prayers not work or not going to fix this, prayers
They're
actually
part of the problem.
Prayers got that guy in the room.
Yeah. I
with
agree.
a gun and with an angst, and so let's maybe we should. Take another approach.
They just don't know what to say, is what it is.
Well, there's that, but
and this is a common sort of a tried and true response to things, and so they just say it. It's unthinking, really.
It comes back to one of those things that I think I have an overabundance of, and that is the desire to learn something every day, and maybe change my opinion based on that. There's such a large portion of, and here's where I come across to people as sounding horribly arrogant. There's such a large portion of the society we live in who don't care. They want to believe more than they want to know, I think is a phrase that you've used in the past. Mm-hmm. I don't understand that mentality. It just, especially again, when it comes to raising kids, I see it as my job every day to instill a thirst for learning and knowledge and skepticism and intelligence and all those are the things that will make them have successful lives. But why doesn't everybody have that? Why do so many of us just resort to, I'm just going with the answers because they're the answers I've always had, even if they don't make sense given new knowledge? It just drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that one. It's puzzling. I don't have a clue why people behave the way they do. I try to figure it out, but it always comes back to, they're unenlightened, which means they're ignorant, which doesn't mean they're dumb. It means they're ignorant, you know?
Yeah. Although many people, when they hear that word, they think you're saying they're dumb.
No.
This is such a tough thing because there is no getting around the fact that the reason that you still hold really, really fallible ideologies is you haven't thought it through. And it's really hard to convey that to them without patronizing.
Yeah,
it is,
and it's also thinking is hard too.
Well, yeah,
and people don't want to do that.
Oh,
They're
we're
not
lazy.
Too interested. Lazy.
It's like training for a marathon, though, right? If you don't use it, it atrophies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, believe me, yeah. Okay, I'm going to back up and try to get the big picture here because I'm a little bit. I think maybe if you were never really devotedly, radically religious, I kind of want to put it in some kind of concise statement that, I'm not hurt by my past relationship with God because I really never had one. I
am, I think.
Okay, talk about that.
The first time, I don't know who it was. It was one of the Four Horsemen. They were sitting in a hotel room as a YouTube video I saw, and they talked about how impressing upon a child, a particularly young child, the ideas of heaven and hell.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And eternal damnation and so on. That's child abuse.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard them say it, I thought, that, there's something to what he's saying, but I got to think about that one more.
It seems harsh, but
it's so far off the track of what I have been led to think and believe. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized, damn straight, it's true.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is child abuse.
It's not because of my parents or teachers that beat this stuff into me. It's more the kid who's thirsty for knowledge, who was staring at the TV screen when he was 7 years old, was watching the preacher prowl on the screen, and then to have and not be able to dissociate that guy from the larger body of what you see as religion in the culture that you live in, and kind of have that extreme validated by the fact that everybody says you got to believe in God. And where do you draw that line? How does the young brain, the concrete brain, figure that out?
They don't.
I don't think I don't think they do, and that's the child abuse thing I'm thinking about. This notion that you tell the kid about hell, and then he becomes, he absorbs this information and has problems. Thinks about it, has terrible dreams about devils, and is, what I mean. These kind of things. That happens. That happens to kids. Why would you want to do that to your child?
Yeah, or that somebody's in the room with you all the time, and that masturbation's a sin, and all that kind of You're just setting the psyche up for nothing but torture and I don't know, it's not healthy. It's
celestial tyranny. It's thought police. It's setting up Big Brother in your own kid's head. And even though everybody that does it, because society is so brainwashed by this, there's no malice on your parents' part. There might be some malice on that fucking TV evangelist, but
yes,
not malice, but just greed. He just knows that he's blowing shit. But anyway, there's something, and I want to go back to the how if we're going to defend this, it is in fact child abuse, which Bob and I think all three of us are in agreement that it is a form of child abuse.
Yes.
And part of why that is, like Bob and I were joking on the porch the other day, and Bob had never heard of this man-boy.
Oh, NAMBLA.
NAMBLA. He'd never heard of it.
Boy Sex Association or something?
Yeah.
What the what?
Yeah.
I've never heard of it either. What is it?
It's basically a online club of pedophiles that just, basically have gotten together and say, yeah, we like boys, so what? And I'll tell you why it's so what. Because, and this is where people go as far as, well, if you're going to give gay rights and marriage rights to gays, next thing you know.
Oh, for crying out loud.
But here's the difference, and it's the word consent. And it's not just the lip service of a little boy going, okay. It's us as a society acknowledging that you do not have the brain capacity to give consent.
Right. 12-year-olds.
So this is what makes it. This is what makes it child abuse in this case. Is that okay? You think you're doing the kid a favor? He seems to be into it, meaning he likes the Noah's Ark story. He likes the, the Daniel in the Lion's Den story. He seems to be into it. Bullshit. He's not old enough to know.
Yeah. Okay, so you struck a nerve for me. One of the things that the Ontario province of Ontario is working through right now. A couple of years ago, our premier and our Liberal provincial government brought forward an update in the teaching curriculum for sex ed. And I don't know if you're familiar with this story at all or not, but basically, the curriculum now includes things like teaching children starting in grade 1 the proper anatomical names for the parts of the body.
Okay.
And as they get older, I think by grade 7, they actually end up talking about the anal and oral sex and the health risks, and the consent is kind of worked throughout the curriculum at an age-appropriate level. So it's a modern, well thought through sex education plan that's been vetted by health professionals and psychologists and so on. And generally, most intelligent people that I know are in support of it. But the fundamentalists and in particular in the Toronto area, there's areas where there's very, very high ethnic immigration populations, or second generation maybe. And they're just all up in arms, taking their kids out of school, holding protests, and the right-wing party in the province is back and forth as to whether or not they want to abolish it or not. Now, the current stance is they say no, they're for it. But I think that's just because they realize most common sense people are looking at it saying, yeah, you need this in this day and age. But I have kids now who are in grades 4 and 5, and that they're now getting the message at school reinforced that we teach them at home. As soon as they were old enough to read, we had books for them that explained human anatomy and the differences between boys and girls and where babies come from. And like, none of that should be shameful. It's not dirty. It's human health. And when my kids grow to be adults, if they have healthy and happy relationships and sexual relationships, I think I've done my job as a parent.
Absolutely.
But there's so many people who are opposed to the idea that you would mention the fact to a kid in grade 2 that there's such a thing as homosexuals out there, or that there are transgender people. I mean, we have people in our family who are homosexuals, and they've come to, Christmas dinner and brought their significant other. They're great people. Like, there's and yet what I found was the kind of one of the first times we had this discussion with their kids when they started bringing these ideas home from school. Their first reaction to same-sex relationships was ooh. Like, where did that come from? Because you got a cousin who is gay, and you love him, and I think you even like his boyfriend better. There's nothing wrong with those guys. Yeah. So I mean, they've digested that idea, and I'm all for that. But it drives me crazy that they're the abstinence only. Don't you dare talk about homosexuals or transgenders to my... Even
hetero. They don't want to talk about sex at all, some of these fundamentalists.
Yeah. Sex is the third rail of Christianity and the culture as well. They're really... I think it goes back to Paul. I think it goes back to all the stuff in the Hebrew Bible about sex and dirtiness and the notion of cleanliness all the time, and all this stuff. What do you say? It's you refuse to be to say I'm sorry for my humanness, for my humanity.
Yeah, apologize for being human.
I wish I had been given that message when I was 10 years old.
Okay,
it's like that would have had a man.
Right.
Would that ever have changed the way your outlook on life? Right.
Well, let's stop there, because that is see, to me, that the reason that we have, and I'm obviously limited to my culture in America, and like right now, the Trump era and this vibe and the zeitgeist right now is just so wacky. But I think that it is, and we are, and human depravity is the result of believing that we're human depraved. I mean, we become what we behold, or like what we think about, we bring about, and so our self-image is what we're going to project. So, from the get-go, a culture and a society that is laden with you are dirty, your own thoughts are dirty, your desires are dirty, you are lost, you need to be found, you are dead, you need to be born again, you are sinful, broken.
Yeah.
And as opposed to just saying, yeah, nobody's perfect, we are fallible, but there's no right or wrong with being fallible. And so anyway, it's just, not only could you just say that for yourself, Homo, but you could say it for everybody could have been a better person had they got a better message at 10 years old. Yeah. And we wouldn't be where we are today electing Trump if it weren't for that message. Because guess who voted for him? The people that are sated and saturated in that message.
And isn't the message as well, don't seek knowledge. Look what happened to Adam and Eve. Don't seek knowledge. Don't think.
That anti-intellectual bias that, and you guys you're about to experience one of the things that we had with Stephen Harper as Prime Minister is the anti-science move.
We're experiencing that, yes.
We have been, but I think I think it's about to get worse.
Yeah.
Well, and
in a big way.
Yeah.
They're taking the climate funding away from NASA.
Yeah. I mean, we're fucked. I'm totally cynical about the future of America. I think that we're done. I think the empire is over. I don't think we'll survive this. So we have already just listed maybe 3 fronts where we're fucked, and there's 25.
Can I breathe a little bit of optimism into that?
Okay.
Please.
I need some.
I think the week before he got elected and the polls were all saying Clinton had it as a slam dunk, I said to a friend of mine, I'm preparing for President Trump. And I just had this feeling, and I'm not clairvoyant or anything, but anyway, okay, so it comes to pass. And the next day I thought, and I don't know if I picked this up from reading something that somebody else said, but okay, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. Say yes to what is. And what this really means now is that in 4 years, people are going to have the best choice they've ever had. They're going to get to see what 4 years of a nutcase in the White House and a far, far, far right-wing Congress and Senate and a right-leaning Supreme Court can do. Mm-hmm. That's enough time for them to truly show what they're all about. And I do have enough faith in humanity that once they see that, they'll say, we don't want to do this ever again. Are
you referring to your new prime minister who's such a cool guy?
I liked his dad more than I liked him.
What's his name? Trudeau.
Yeah. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was his father, and he was like, this is now in the late 60s or early 70s, but he said, is famous for saying on national television that the government has no right in the bedrooms of the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I guess I'm wondering if your optimism, given that the guy before Trudeau was a fundamentalist Christian or whatever, and that the future's bright because of an example by Trudeau.
I think it's broader than that.
Okay.
There's 2 institutions, if you will, that if I didn't continue to have some amount of trust and faith in, I think I'd probably give it up tomorrow. One is science and the other is democracy. They both have self-correcting mechanisms built in. And so long as those mechanisms function, there's reason to be hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were talking about that on the porch too, strangely enough, about the idea that within democracy itself are the seeds of its destruction. You know what I mean? And then we point to Germany, how Hitler was in fact democratically elected and what have you.
Yeah.
And when people stop thinking and just start reacting, and this is pretty much like it here in this country. It's like 50-50, Yeah, it's very weird.
50% that didn't vote.
Oh, well, okay.
That's where the optimism is, right? They're going to come out next time.
Okay. Well, I hope so. I just hope that like you said, all our democratic institutions do their jobs, including the press and everybody else.
Yeah, so. you have to continue to fight for freedom of the press and freedom of speech and the Johnson Amendment and all the things that have been kicked around lately and that's where the fight needs to happen so that you're alive for the next election. My opinion.
So
armchair quarterback.
Yeah.
Can I drag us back to the reason why I'm
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word angry, but although that's the way it comes across to a lot of people externally. Yes, I'm angry at various aspects of religion, but mixed in with that, there's disappointment and frustration that probably manifests itself as anger or appears as anger, right? It's like that frustration that people aren't more curious and willing to accept new ideas based on new evidence. The frustration that, like, I read an article in the news today about a 15-year-old honor student who happens to be an immigrant family from Pakistan in Toronto, and he was beaten with a baseball bat to within inches of his life a couple of nights ago, and to the point where his brain function has he's having difficulty speaking.
Oh, gee.
Now, my reply to that on Twitter was my faith in my fellow Canadians just dropped a notch. That saddens me to the depths of my being.
Yeah.
I don't understand how anybody could ever go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that fear, that hate,
It's fear
that
of the
darkness.
other. Yeah.
I don't understand that. I can't get that low. Yeah.
So yeah, there's so some of the other things like taxing of the churches. Like, why should I have to pay for or subsidize an organization that's going to spend that money proselytizing, when the Death with Dignity organization that's actually helping people to die that are suffering, they lost their tax exempt status under Stephen Harper's government.
Oh,
boy.
That it just seems it's one of those like core fairness things, right? Like, this just does not make sense.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that we're running into with, okay, so we just talked about how they're anti-intellectual, they're anti-science, they're not, they're anti-fact, but they wouldn't obviously say any of those. They would say, no, we're pro-wisdom, we're pro-truth. In fact, we're pursuing truth more than you are. You have the wrong truth, and that is where we're at. Everybody has their own set of facts.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
And when you're trying to talk to somebody who has a completely different set of quote-unquote facts, you can't talk.
No, there's
there is the end of discussion it is over.
Right. We're going full circle to where does truth come from?
Right.
And like the best truth we have, in my opinion, is that which we get from science, even though it's imperfect.
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with you. We were talking about this again on the porch the other day, saying people just don't understand the scientific method. That's one of the problems. If they understood how rigorous, this process is, how rigorous the methodology is as well, that, the scientists, those in colleges and universities, understand that we fool ourselves so much. We have cognitive dissonance, we have
bias,
biases and stuff. So they build in to that methodology ways to make sure that doesn't stay there. You know what I mean? To get that out.
Peer review and skeptical.
Exactly.
Everybody's looking for a way to shoot it down.
Yeah, so we have peer review. That's another thing. So over and over and over, as rigorous as we can, we get to 99.999, in terms of our reliability, right? That this is true as it can be right now.
Sure.
And you leave the door open.
Yeah, and you leave the door open. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff they don't understand. And it's pretty simple, really, but they refuse to understand it, maybe.
As soon as my kids were old enough, I started showing them, we control how much screen time they get on a daily basis, but sometimes they get extra screen time if it's deemed high-quality stuff. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that falls into that high-quality stuff category is Cosmos.
Oh, what a great show.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Because it's some great stories out of this. There's a couple of different places where they talk about the scientific method, question authority and always ask good questions and so on. At one point, I think it was in grade 3, my daughter came home from school and the teacher had asked each kid in the class who their idol was. And my daughter said Sir Isaac Newton, and I just about hit the ceiling in my jump for joy.
Yeah, way to go.
Isaac Newton, wow. So not the Kardashians, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think we'll have this battle won when the U.S. gets to the point where you say, "In science we trust" as your national motto instead of "In God we trust." Well, but we got a long way to go.
What we don't have as a people is we're not fully frustrated or angry with the process of opining. Meaning, if we get in a room, that thing that went around the web a while back, is the dress purple or is it yellow or
gold
whatever, gold or blue?
Gold or blue, yeah.
And it's almost this is what I'm talking about as far as getting into an argument over like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, or things that are unknown. But that which we can know and is knowable, we're still having debates. And that's where I want everybody to get frustrated with opinion. And actually, just as we started this last little discourse, Homo, you said, in my opinion, but actually it wasn't your opinion. You were saying the best source of truth is science. That's not your opinion. That's actually reality.
Well, there are a lot of people who share that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
but I'm wanting people. This is where I get to. Everybody's got their own set of facts, and I'll go back to this. I swear this is the root of all evil, almost
Okay.
one of the many. But and that is this just world hypothesis that abides in the minds of people who want and need, deeply, deeply need and want the world to make sense. They are horrified by chaos and absurdity and disorder. They just literally can't get out of bed if they believe that was true.
So isn't that the root of the power of myth?
Well, it's what drives it, yeah.
Yeah.
But once somebody grows up, then they can do like no, seriously, they can take these wonderful myths like Campbell did and say these are beautiful narratives that have moral to the story and there's a message and we can get it. But what we're talking about now is people that have grown up with those myths who are still holding them as facts.
And some have hold power over us.
Yeah, and
as well.
they hold office and they hold power. But okay, so this lies versus truth, it's like, don't bother me with the facts. So this is the frustration, and I think this is why we are two Americas right now, for one thing, is that you have those who have been able to look in the face of reality and say yes to it, and you have those that have not. And don't bother me with the facts. I've got my own set of facts.
Right.
And
So it's not really facts, it's ideological opinion.
well, yeah, I'm throwing that word around very much in quotes.
Yeah, but and we're talking about one way of doing things, and which is an ideology as well. But they happen to hold power right now, so there's going to be a change in hegemony.
Right. And
that's the way it goes.
I know that Homo's ready to talk, but I got one more statement, and that was I retweeted something that Neil Carter, and I don't have it in front of me verbatim, but I think many of us are noticing that we ex-religious, ex-Christian people, when we're talking or arguing with a Christian, where it hits a wall is where they start referring to their own set of facts or their truth claims which we know that they can't actually claim, but that's where it dead ends is my point. And now we're finding that in political conversations.
Right.
That Trump has his own set of truths. Like the people that are like, well, Trump's for the Constitution. Well, his actions actually are tearing the Constitution apart, and his appointees and his desires and such. And so, but don't bother them with they have their own set of facts, and this is what I'm saying. So I'll shut up.
No. You talk sometimes about trying to find that balance between, standing up for atheism and trying to find a way to get along with the religious mindset. And I get that. And I'm on the same sort of, where am I on that spectrum? But there's two counteracting forces there, and you've hit them both today. One is that you can't have a meaningful discussion with two different people who don't see the facts the same way. So as much as you want to stay in the room with difference, that's the other one. I leave the room when I realize that other person, if they say the Bible is the inerrant word of God, I'm done. Because
well, how are you going to argue with that? Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can argue with it, but why? What's the point?
You're not going to make much progress.
Exactly.
Nope.
Yeah.
Their mind's made up.
So can I turn a 90-degree turn here?
Absolutely.
You guys have interviewed, I don't remember the fellow's name, and it was quite some time ago, but you interviewed a guy who did a thesis on Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah.
Robert Pirsig.
Yeah.
That's a book that I read when I was in my early 20s, and
Okay.
I think I would say that changed me, because it left me with, and it's been so long since I read the book, I don't remember a lot of the details, but the one thing that is still stuck with me to this day is that what Pirsig refers to as quality, and I put that in quotes because he uses the word in a way that that doesn't mean the same thing that for most people quality does. Is that it's the root or the intersect of art, science, and religion. And and the subtitle of the book is "What is good? What is not good? Do we need someone to tell us these things?" Like that's the theme we've been talking about today. No, you should be able to figure that on your own, and you should have a thirst for it. And that root of art, science, and religion is the awe, the wonder, the cool idea, the inspiration, all those, when you're doing science and you have to come up with a hypothesis, you're pulling something out of nothing. It's creativity out of thin air. It's no different than standing in front of a blank canvas or out in nature, just being awed by the world that we live in and the fact that we're sentient at this time in the cosmos. I don't know. I love that book. And there's a couple of interviews that CBC Radio has done with Robert Pirsig that are very, very good. One was done back in the 70s, and they did another one on the 40th anniversary of the book.
Well, he doesn't do very many, so yeah, those would be precious.
Yeah.
But I think of I don't know if it was Plato, but kind of this ancient Greek use of the word beauty. And this is, and actually for us open-minded deists, then we could say, this is the divine, or this is God. Not a person, not a being, but where you find beauty and where you find quality and where you find goodness or whatever. It's, I know it's a Pauline passage, but whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is worthy of praise, meditate on these things. That's one of the admonitions of Scripture.
Yeah, you talk to somebody who does pure science or pure math for a living, and like people who are working on leading edge math problems. There's a documentary I watched recently. I don't remember what it's called, but it's all about math. And we're talking leading edge people here, and they talk about whether or not the things that they're producing are learned or discovered. Are they actually learning new things, or was what they're learning there all along and they've just found a way to uncover it? I don't know the answer to that, but that's a cool way to look at it. And I think that there's as much beauty and elegance in a great solution to a math problem as there is in a good painting or beautiful music or anything else that inspires people. It's all the same thing. It's what is good.
Right. Well, that just to go back to your reference, that's episode 75 with David Buchanan.
Yes.
And interesting guy. And we've remained friends on Facebook since, as I have with almost every guest. Yeah, that's, the reason I wanted to have, obviously, I'd like to have Pirsig on, but that was the next best thing. Is this guy actually knew him and wrote his thesis on it, and it was an interesting.
Yeah, but I agree with that. The notion of the math problem, to know, talk about awesome and wonder, full of wonder. The notion that you're able to use, ciphers, use numbers and what have you, math
symbols,
calculations, to be able to land a spacecraft on a moon or on an asteroid within 6 meters of where. That's just incredible. How is that even possible? And they do it. So there you go. That's all awe-inspiring to me. So,
well, yes, to many. But again, I know people who would say, how does that change my day-to-day life here? Why are we spending money on that?
Yeah, and I think to me that goes back to cerebral sloth.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm pragmatic. Don't get me wrong. I do care about how it affects the price of eggs in Murfreesboro. I don't know, but I feel like that the brain power that it took to calculate what you just talked about with the math to go to the moon. Yeah, because you're talking about forces pushing against forces. It's insane brilliance, and took a lot of great minds to put together. And and now we just been talking about basically a population that doesn't have the IQ to do that.
180 degrees from that.
And whatever.
Yeah.
You know where a lot of the frustration comes for me that probably appears outwardly as anger is the fact that we live in a world where anybody in 30 seconds can ask some of the toughest questions and the answer will be spoken back to them by the device in their hand. So like if you want to know how old the earth is, or you want to know what Newton's law of gravity is, or whatever, you just ask your phone or your tablet or your Echo device or whatever it is, and there it is, right? It's,
Right.
And yet, even though it's that easy,
I
there are
see.
still people who don't have the curiosity to even ask the question.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. That's frustrating because historically we could say, well, they don't really have access to that information. So their ignorance and their naivete is forgivable. We'll cut them some slack. But nope, not anymore.
We have Google
Exactly. Yeah.
No, to whom much is given, much is required. I mean, the accountability goes up when your access to information goes up. So yeah.
But again, that I don't really care about that. I'm not interested in that. I don't know where we start. Maybe in school. I don't know what we do to.
Well, we're comfortable. We get comfortable.
Yeah, I guess.
Don't bother me with the facts.
Here's an anecdote that kind of illustrates that problem.
Okay.
And something went past me on Twitter a few weeks ago and I think it was a survey that was done of the U.S. population and how many people know whether or not the Earth goes around the sun or the sun goes around the Earth. And some large proportion that surprised the living crap out of me of Americans didn't know that the Earth went around the sun. And I reacted incredulously, and my wife said to me, I learned that eons ago and haven't had a reason to think about it since. So if you were to ask me that question, I might get it wrong. And I thought, okay, fair enough. Because when I step out and look at the sky, I think about stuff like that. Most people probably don't.
No, I do. I hear you. Yeah.
And when I think about what time is it, two time zones away, it reminds me that, the Earth is rotating on its axis, and that's why we have different time zones. But for most people, it's just, no, there's a 2-hour time difference between here and there. They don't know or care why. And I can forgive them that. But you ask, where does it start? Not only does it start in education, but I think it goes back to the pet peeve I've been expressing all along. You gotta have that curious. How do we not drive that thing which is instinctive and natural in children, that curiosity to learn that they're so good at as a toddler and as an infant? Somehow we manage to drive that out of people by the time they become adults.
That's true,
What
yeah.
can we do differently to not do that?
Well, that's very true. In school, I tell you, in secondary school in this country, I think they just beat the crap out of creativity until these kids know when to stand up and move because the bell rang. They understand stuff like that, but other stuff, it's and I'm not painting them with a wide brush. There are some great students, clearly more wonderful students than we could imagine. And my wife's a high school English teacher as well, so I hear about stuff.
I know this is going to be a leap, but I center a lot of things in the disgust that I think there are people that are disgusted. We talked about it earlier when we were talking about sexuality. That why are people why we're disgusted. I mean, Christians and theists and people, like I said, the just world hypothesis, people that need the world to be good and need the world to be clean, and actually they so hate the maybe the monkeys, or like they go to the zoo and they see them throwing their own feces, and they do not. No, seriously, they do not want to be aligned.
Associated with that's my cousin over there.
Yeah, I don't even want anybody to think or know that I actually shit.
Yeah, you're right.
There's such an aversion to being human. There's such a self-disgust.
Yeah. Hey man, come on.
So here's where it comes: is that don't be curious. Drive down curiosity, because all right. So here's I had an answer. I had a I have no idea where I was going with that.
No, don't worry about it. I can relate. I think it's that 50-year-old syndrome. Hey, not to worry. Again, there's some reason to be optimistic on the education front, because no doubt you guys have heard of the Khan Academy.
No, what's that?
Yeah.
I haven't heard. What's that?
I have. Yeah.
Maybe I have. What is it?
It's an online thing.
Oh yes, the online guy. The
Sal
guy
Khan.
Yeah. Yes, I have heard of that.
So, and that's just one of many, right? Like my kids, when they come home and even if they haven't been given homework to do, we do a little bit of homework every day. Sometimes it's net math. Sometimes it's, there's sites you can go to that will train you to do a spelling bee and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I know, having talked to some students who graduated more recently from high school, they said, Khan Academy got me through high school. Because
Wow.
if you, all of us had the experience of having a bad teacher somewhere along the way.
Right.
Oh, sure.
And we kind of muddle through. But now, when you go to high school and you have a bad teacher, you can say, "Screw that! I'm just going to go learn it from this guy on the internet."
Yeah.
And
very
I'm
true.
gonna, that kind of stuff is not only changing the mechanisms by which people acquire an education, but I think it's going to help with regard to that curiosity thing that we're talking about.
Right.
If you have an internet connection and a laptop in the middle of Africa and you're curious and motivated, you can get as good an education as you can practically anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Well said.
That's
yes.
revolutionary stuff.
That's true. What's your line of work anyway?
I have a mechanical engineering degree, but I've spent most of my work life working in computer-related stuff and industrial plants and data
I get
management
it.
type stuff.
That's cool. Well, you're very well spoken, and
Well, thank you.
yeah, and it sounds like I was going to guess maybe you're a professor of some kind. I don't know.
Well, funny you should say that, because I would love to be a professor, and,
Sure.
and recently I've been doing. I volunteer at my daughter's school with their Lego robotics course.
Wow.
So after school, they have a club where they build these robots and they program them to accomplish these different challenges, and they go off in competitions and that kind of thing.
How awesome is that? That's great.
Yeah, so that's stuff that is starting to find its way into the official curriculum, but to a large extent now it's still sort of on the periphery in clubs and so on. I also volunteer. There's an organization in our local school board that puts scientists in the classroom to do certain types of demonstrations. So they have one on where you glue popsicle sticks to build a bridge, and you learn about
Weight bearing stuff and loads and all that stuff. Yeah.
But it's just a fun activity, and the kids get a chance to spend an afternoon with somebody other than their regular teacher who gives them a different perspective on life. And I've got one session that I do where I teach kids how to program something that looks like like a complete octave on a piano. So when you hit the keys, it makes the right sounds, and you can program to play a song. But those kinds of things, I think, are going to help push the education system in the direction that we're talking about needing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it more interesting and more modern and more creative.
Don't segregate everything either. I mean, things have to overlap. You know what I mean? Because that's the way it is in life. It's not strictly math, strictly science, strictly reading, strictly. It's everything all together, all the time. And
Cross-disciplinary.
Yeah, cross disciplines. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the way it is in the real world. You know, so I think you can do it that way.
Yeah. So you heard the upside down classroom?
Nope.
Tell us.
This is your wife probably has, being in the field she's in, but the idea is that you go home at night, and instead of doing the homework they gave you, you actually watch the lecture at home. And then when you come back into the classroom, you solve the problems and you resolve any of the questions and issues that you have, and you do it in a social environment. So the teacher's there as a resource, but so are your peers.
So the lecture's at home and the homework's in the class.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the
But
upside
now
down.
that starts to reflect the reality of the working world, right?
Absolutely it does. Yes.
So I'm a huge fan of that. I mean, maybe not going whole hog and doing it all that way, but there's certainly some of the maths and sciences where I would say that absolutely makes sense. And in reality, it's a little bit more like, I mean, I'm sure English teachers have been doing this for a long time. Go home and read these chapters, and tomorrow we're going to do this.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, the upside down classroom. How about it? I love it. Yeah.
It drastically changes the role of the teacher from,
Lecturer to facilitator of discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I was a teacher, I'd find that more interesting.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's the fun part. It's not the answer, how you got to the answer. And, and let's talk about that.
That's one of the reasons I love podcasting more than writing a book, because it's a monologue. And I'd rather be in conversation.
The book is. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I envy you guys, because the kind of discussion we're having today, I just don't have much opportunity to have anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. And we gotta, I mean, guys like us, we gotta find that. I mean, it's like a volcano. And that's what I'm saying earlier about my wife is like, I'm just, wanting to have this philosophical conversation with somebody.
There's
and you're
nobody to talk to.
You're the closest human. And she's like, nope, not going to go there with you.
Wow.
No, but, okay, so before we get into a couple of more personal things, I did remember what I was going to say, and so I guess in general, I think there's a disdain within naysayers is what Nietzsche calls, the non-yes-sayers. In the just world hypothesis is that they don't like what it means to be human. And if it comes right down to it, the prefrontal cortex is the only thing other than that has creativity or curiosity. Now, we could say the spider builds a beautiful web, but that's instincts.
I don't know. I heard a story just yesterday that makes me question that because
okay, go for
it was about crows, I think.
Okay.
And there's a guy who put on two different masks, and he went out and he scared the crows when he was wearing one mask, and he fed them when he was wearing the other one. And then they came back several years later, and in subsequent generations of the crows, they just could distinguish between the one mask and the other.
Really? Wow.
Now, I haven't verified this myself, but the guy I was talking to was certainly saying, I don't think he would have made it up.
Yeah, that's some type of genetic thing.
Well, and
that's very interesting.
That's
though.
awesome, but it doesn't contradict what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is that all right, so the reason why I think religion stifles curiosity is, for one thing, we've already got the answers, don't bother me with the facts. We've established that's the mindset of a religionist. But the other thing is, well, and the tendency to clone. There's a tendency to make clones within these mindsets, like the exaltation of your uniqueness and the bringing out of your unique qualities is discouraged. As far as, don't think for yourself, and you've got to march in step with the rest of us. Yeah. Sign this declaration of our statement of faith. If you don't, you're not one of us. Mm-hmm. So conform.
Sure, right.
And so I don't know. I'm just saying that there's a stifling of curiosity that is created in the atmosphere of religion, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't disagree at all. I don't see how that, maybe it's more subtle how that plays out within the education system that I went through. Because, I don't ever recall in school being told that you weren't allowed to be creative. So there's something subtle that's happening in that process that made me understand that message. It was never overt.
Yeah, there are kids, though, that will come forward. I used to teach in college, and they will come forward and they'll say, what are you looking for in this answer? Do you want it more this way or that way? It's like, well, why are you they're negotiating with me because they're trying to kiss my butt because they want a good answer. They want to write a good answer down. And
tell me what you want to hear, and I'll say it.
Yeah, and I'll say it right back at you.
Which is a total lack of creativity and curiosity.
And that's not the synthetic way of learning. That's not synthesis. We want to put ideas together to understand and make new ideas and stuff. So that does happen. Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I'll say just pretty much what I said there, which is no, you don't worry so much about what I need. Tell me, or they'll say, how many pages should that be? And I'll say, it should be as many pages as it takes for you to tell me what it is you're trying to say.
What you got out of it.
Yeah, what did you learn? That type of stuff. So you just have to kind of unhook that thinking to let them know that it's okay in this classroom. It's okay to think and talk and discuss.
But he's in survival mode.
What the little kid is? Or?
Yeah, well, whoever's asking you that, they just want to pass the class.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
They're afraid they're not. So I don't know. I see fear and survival mode, showing up. And I think that's what religion is. Yeah. That's what appeals to religion is, as opposed to, this is where hell is child abuse for children, is that if you take the stakes away of being right or wrong. Heaven and hell are the stakes. Right? You get this wrong, it's eternal punishment. You get this right, it's eternal bliss. So the stakes are high. I don't know. I'm philosophically drilling down there, but I just think the culture that creates fear and the need to be right and insecurity is always going to produce the worst of human nature.
Okay, that rings truer with me because
I can hear that.
I grew up in a household, and I always just thought that, let me back up a little bit. My heritage is European. My grandparents or great-grandparents, maybe one generation further, all came from predominantly the British Isles. And I always thought, the whole British stiff upper lip and children should be seen, not heard type mentality. I thought that was the kind of the norm for how the households that most people grew up in. So, it's changed recently a little bit with my dad, but for the most part, I have no recollection in my 52 years of any kind of deep philosophical, meaningful, even political conversation around the dinner table or sitting in the living room. It's like you just don't talk about sex, religion, politics, or money, period. It's not polite to talk about those things in mixed company or in any company, really.
Because they're incendiary sometimes, and people are afraid to talk about it without hurting feelings or whatever. Sure.
Yeah, and I understand why we're that way, but I think that's part of the problem that we're talking about, where we squelch curiosity, is if the people that you trust the most and have the most influence on your developmental years in your life aren't willing to venture into that kind of territory, you're not going to develop the skills you need to do it as an adult, and you're going to be terrible at it. And I think that's part of it.
And it does have to do with sloth, I think, what we talked about. But it's also, what is it, can of worms? You're afraid to open this up.
Yeah.
What is inside Pandora's box, by the way?
Every bad thing in the world.
Okay, yeah. So there's just this fear of don't go, don't open that.
Don't look. But I think our guest is right when he says, there are teachable moments. There are moments that you should recognize as, okay, I gotta.
And those are gold because I was thinking this as you were talking about your childhood and the lack of curiosity and the lack of fostering creativity. Well, sometimes it's just not there, and I think that's why we use the phrase "education is wasted on the youth." Is a lot of times there's a lecturer up front trying to tell a group of kids something that they don't give a rat's ass about.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's throwing out seeds, but the ground is not valid.
But the teacher's job, in my opinion, is to connect the dots. Is to make relevant that information.
That's the genius.
That's how you got to understand.
That's a good teacher.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I think that's true.
To a large extent, that's the role of literature for me. You lead people to these life situations where you can understand those lessons a whole lot better when it's done as a story that the participant feels like they're walking in. There are human curiosities that need to be unlocked, and literature and especially fiction does a great job of that.
Very true.
Yeah, teaching young kids how to read and to have a thirst for reading is, one of the huge things that you can do for a kid.
Oh, absolutely. Good readers are good writers, too, usually. They can express themselves better.
Well, aren't we the intellectual snobs?
Oh, yes, I guess. I'm sorry.
No, I'm serious. We really, we're this is pedantic almost as far as how much we're praising,
right.
academia.
But, where it started, the ground of religion. That's where it all started. So
what started?
This conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not just religion. It's politics and sex and everything else too, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the skills to have a civil conversation about topics of meaning, we end up with the sort of politics we have today, where people won't talk to each other, and the machinery of government grinds to a halt, and like we have to get back to the point where people will go across the aisle and find some common ground and find a way to see the same facts. And we're going in the opposite direction at this point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. We're running on an hour and a half. But so to get in the home stretch a little bit, we just did a show last week with a guest who had adoptees, and I think maybe you two are our only two, and they just happen to be back to back. So talk a little bit about what you do. Well, what's the nationality or ethnicity of your adopted children, and what do you guys do for fun as a family and things like that?
All right. As far as nationality, I don't want to get too detailed, but mixed enough that a lot of people, when they see us together as a family, first of all, they think you're the grandpa because I'm old enough to be the grandpa.
Because their ages again are what, 10 and 7 or?
They're 9 and 10 right now.
Okay, 9 and 10.
Yeah, but when they were 2 and 3, I mean, I've got gray hair and I don't look like I'm 30. So
yeah.
And what do we do for fun? Lots of reading goes on in this house. We recently went through a big bout of Rubik's Cube.
Oh, can you do it?
I learned how to do it in high school, and then I learned again a couple of weeks back, and so that I could teach my 10-year-old, and she's now doing it regularly under 2 minutes and quite often under 1. So when we have races, she's beating me all the time. Yeah.
Hey, cool.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
I like to dabble with a lot of different technologies and see where the kids are interested in playing with that.
Like what? Video games or computer games?
Oh no, learning how to do stuff on the computer. So
Okay.
like we have these. You can get something called an MBot, and you can program it with a programming language where you just drag the pieces together and snap them together. So you can program your robot to run around the room and turn when it sees something in front of it, or if it hears you yell at it, or stuff like that.
Well, see, up until this point, we've been talking to you for an hour and a half. You seem like a normal guy, and I get to the end and find out you're a super nerd. You are a giant nerd.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I wear that label proudly.
Yeah, well, that is a proud label. That is not a derogatory term, especially coming from me. But
That's right, Mr. Nerd.
But that's amazing. Like that, learning to write code with your kids and reading books and doing Rubik's cubes. I mean, that is.
Well, do you guys go to movies and watch TV
Oh, that'd
shows
be
or
way
stuff?
too pop culture for
I
this.
bet
Well,
you
no.
they
We do, but we try to focus a lot on documentaries and nature and science stuff. And,
Finky movies.
Yeah. Well, what about just fun movies like a Disney film or something? Would they go to that?
we'll go to the odd new release at the theater. There was one that the kids really enjoyed recently. It's called Flipped.
Flipped. I don't know if I've heard that.
It's a Rob Reiner film, and it's about two kids, a boy and a girl, where the boy moves onto the same street as the girl when they're quite young, and then they follow the development of these two kids and their interactions over a period of years, and then they see it, they tell it through both the boy's perspective and then the girl's perspective. And there's some great stuff in this movie about how to if you're going to be friends with someone, pick people for the right reasons.
Okay. I'm going to check that
there's
out.
a lot of it's a good story.
Yeah.
And they really like. Oh, I want to see it again. And we're coming. It's been a year or more now, but we've come past the phase where all they ever want to watch is cartoons. So it's now they're watching real life stories and asking good questions. And
Excellent. Well, you got to be so proud of them. That's excellent.
yeah, very much. And we also we have a dog that needs a lot of exercise, so walking the dog every day is something we try to get in there. And
Excellent.
So I don't know if you avoided this answer on purpose, but forgive me if I'm prying, but like, what country did the kids come from?
Oh, Canada.
Oh, okay. They're
So yeah. I didn't finish that story. We originally tried to adopt internationally, but that process slowed down to a absolute crawl.
Okay.
And then we moved provinces and kind of had to start the whole bureaucratic process all over again. And a weird set of circumstances.
So were they in the foster system till they were 2 or 3?
Yeah, in and out.
In and out of the foster system. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like you got them 7 years ago, but yet they were already.
Yeah, they were little kids, real small.
Yeah.
Toddlers, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're doing so well. You hit the proud is absolutely the right word for it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
They impress me.
Yeah.
Well, they're lucky to have you.
You hear that sentiment quite a bit.
Okay.
But
push back.
But we're way luckier to have them than they are to have us.
And anytime I hate competition typically, but when we're in competition to see who's the luckiest, that's a good competition.
Yeah.
And everybody's deferring to the others, or at least they're insisting. Because my wife and I know for a fact that I'm the lucky one, and as long as she feels like she's the lucky one, then we're good to go.
Sure.
So we belonged. I was on a discussion board many years ago about adoption, and there was one guy who said, "I'm not particularly attached to my DNA," and that was one of the reasons that he wanted to adopt. And that rings so true.
That
to me.
is interesting. Yeah.
Blood means nothing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family is about who you love and who you care for and who you're willing to go the extra mile for, and it has nothing to do with blood.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very naturalistic perspective, or at least it's afforded to you better by being a naturalist, because again, I'm going back to the reason why people are kicking and scratching to elevate themselves over the monkeys they evolved from, or whatever they disdain or hate about being alive is that I'm not just a cockroach that's here and gone. I live forever. This universe was built with me in mind by God, who loves me and knows the number of hairs on my head. Like this need for identity and value and validation, falsely. And these are all false. These are lies.
Yeah. Right.
But I'm so insecure, and I so self-hate my own life, my own existence, and the disgustingness of this absurdness, that these narratives that I frame. And I guess what I'm saying is, and you see it in Trump. Trump's literally has boasted about his genetic code.
Yeah, I know he talks about his genes.
Oh, it's
got
frightening.
good genes.
Eugenics,
Yeah.
is that what you call that? Or
Well, eugenics would be maybe something that might happen if we don't watch ourselves. But no, he is. He just thinks he has great genes.
he says
Eugenics
good
is-
genes. It's white supremacy.
Yeah, pretty well.
It is.
I think it is.
But I mean, if there was, like you said earlier, you could excuse that type of mentality 50 years ago.
No.
Given what we know about genetics and
Yeah.
the migration
Well,
of
that's what I'm
humanity
saying.
across the planet and so on, it's like you can take some kid from a pygmy tribe who knows nothing about technology, take him at 6 weeks and have him grow up in a North American household, and they'll be every bit as likely to be as knowledgeable and intelligent and productive as anybody else who was born here.
Yeah.
We have the same brains.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying that your non-attachment to your DNA and your ability to love these adopted children, literally, not just as if they're your own, but literally as they're. I mean, like and again, this is a big deal. I'm sorry to delay the show on this note because I'm onto something here, and that is that if you by looking at things naturally. Just like he, you just said about the child that you pull him out of third world country and teach him this, that's a notion of seeing the sameness of everyone. That's a notion of seeing the connectedness of everyone, and not just my family tree. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you become, like what Bob says all the time, the interconnected web of all things. And this is in itself a built-in suppression of racism, of misogyny, of xenophobia, of fear of the other. It's built in. If you're a good, solid naturalist, you're going to have you're going to be incapable of being a bigot.
I see the argument you're making, and I agree.
maybe that's true,
However,
yeah, so-
my situation is like life is often a series of accidents, right?
For sure.
We just as easily in an alternative universe could have had biological children and not gone this route. The primary reason why we ended up adopting was because of how old we were when we decided we were ready to start a family.
Yeah.
Now, given what I know now, looking back, if anybody were to ask me if building a family via adoption is, what are the issues and would you do it again? You probably wouldn't find a more vocal proponent of it.
Than yourself.
But that's it's easy to come across when you have this discussion as though you think it's better than biological, and it's not. It's just different.
Yeah.
We got to the point of having a family by a different way because of the accidents of life that happened to us. So, every human being deserves a loving, caring, providing home.
You bet.
And that's the humanist, that's the natural thing. And forming a family out of people who don't have the same genetics is a lot more natural than many people would think.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain that until you've actually been through it.
Right,
No, I
I'm
get
sure,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
How long you been married to your wife?
1991.
Okay.
A while. Yeah.
Yeah, 35 years.
Cool.
Yeah. So the decision to have children, you just kept
Was delayed.
procrastinating
Was
or
delayed.
something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we both have siblings who had children and subsequently marriages that fell apart, and we got to watch that.
And how painful that was.
Yeah, and I think I was probably the biggest reason why we held back. And it's like, I cannot bring myself to consider myself and put myself in the position of being a parent until I know that I'm ready for it, because that's an undertaking that is just too important to do on a whim.
Beautiful.
Especially when it's a deliberate choice. Like if it's an accident and you end up pregnant, well, you didn't do it deliberately, but it's not the same kind of deliberateness as I'm going to go through this adoption process.
All right, so you've pointed out something that I've noticed in my post-Christianity. Like when I was a Christian, and I don't know, maybe it was just my youthful naivete as well, but the flippancy with which I brought 4 human beings into this earth is horrifying to me. When I look back on it, I gave it no. I mean, I probably give more thought to, which coffee brand to drink or something than I did should we have a kid or not. I mean, it was just like, this is what we do.
Well, yeah.
It was just so normal.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
And I'll be honest with you, and I've said this on the show before, but I have personally apologized to all 4 of my kids for bringing them into the world without their permission. I mean, I just think
Go ahead. What's funny is that people sometimes, especially in the political climate we have today, they talk about there should be an intelligence test to vote.
Oh, sure, I've heard that.
Or at least,
have babies.
yeah.
This is. I know where you're going, and this is scary because this gets into
every time I
Orwellian
hear
shit.
that, I think, okay, I see there's some sense to that, but how about we apply that same thing to bringing children into the world?
Absolutely, but you know what?
It's horrible.
Next thing you do, you're neutering stupid people.
Yeah. Then we're getting into eugenics. Now we're getting
I absolutely want to make it clear that I'm not suggesting there should be an intelligence test.
But I'm just saying that's the slippery slope.
Yeah,
I hate that phrase too, but anyway,
it's the reality. It's that stupid series of accidents again, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Sapien, it's been a joy to talk to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Likewise.
Yeah, great stuff. Honest to goodness, we appreciate it.
Well, I can appreciate how much work it must be and time commitment it must be for you guys to do this, but I speak for a great many when I say I look forward to hearing more and more, and I hope you're able to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, we will.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot. Good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Likewise. Take care.
Bye-bye. Homo Sapien.
Yes, Dr. Sapien. In case you're wondering, when if you were wondering, if you didn't hear the top of the show, you were wondering why every now and again Cass would say, "So, Homo," I just want to, he wasn't being derogatory.
Which it's not derogatory.
No,
anyway.
no, of
it just
course
means
not.
same.
Yeah, it means same. Yeah. Exactly. But a lot of people. But
anyway, he wanted to go incognito, and that's the name he chose.
And we did it.
And it did make for a playful name, but wow, a great guy.
We're just all over the place with the comments.
And
too, but
I don't know.
I enjoyed it.
Just, I don't know, being with somebody that smart gets my wheels turning, but they get going so fast or so. I get lost in my own thoughts. I can't remember. There was 6 or 3 or 4 times in that talk where he provoked something in me.
Right.
And I wanted to say it, and then when I tried to say it, I couldn't
get it all out.
I couldn't catch the rabbit. I mean, I couldn't. It was bigger than me, or it was faster than me, and I'd get lost in my own thoughts. But that's how provocative it. I mean, he's really smart.
Yeah, smart guy, has much to say, and very articulate, says it well. I liked it. It's different than the usual shows we do.
Oh yeah.
Because as I said, in the near the end, the ground that we prepared was for religion, and out of this ground grew all these other things that are so interconnected with religion. I mean, you can't escape them, which is, I think, what our show's about as well. So
we're trying to escape them, or at least mitigate their overreach of influencing.
And we talk about that all the time, about how, if you really want to understand the culture of the nation, you've got to understand our religion.
Yeah.
If you want to understand history, you've got to understand religion. So it tarnishes, I was going to say, but it touches everything, and maybe tarnishes everything too.
And I think we would all benefit by the education of how we got here and the formation of religion, because instead of looking at it as like this absolute truth that defines the world, we go, oh, it's this man-made narratives that came up through the ages, and we would have a right view of it and not a hegemonic view.
Exactly. If you want to really understand religion, understand the Roman Empire. Understand the power of the Roman Empire when it has a state religion behind it.
Yeah.
That's how many years ago? 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet we're still. That's pretty powerful stuff.
You're about to reference the Mondovian Bridge or something. What is that word?
No. What was it? The Melvian Bridge. Milvian Bridge. Yeah. That's where it all happened.
Yeah. In another universe, a multiverse.
Yes. The whoever it was, Maxentia, didn't lose. He won.
Yeah.
So there's a different universe. What would our country be like? What would our world be like without Christianity? And there's a story we could weave from that historic moment.
And that kind of thinking is just, that's playing out in real time 24/7 in everybody's life.
Yeah.
As far as the choices we make and the consequences thereof.
Yeah.
And so we are in a world, I mean, so we could, in a world. That is like, what would the world be like without a Trump presidency? Well, I would have liked to have known.
Yeah.
But that's not the world I live in now.
Nope.
I mean, in a way, the multiverse, I just got on the wrong verse.
You got off the.
I don't want to be
to a new universe.
I don't want to be on this bus.
Yeah.
I don't want to see where this goes at all.
Wouldn't it be cool if we could jump
universes?
on a different one? Yeah.
And our consciousness, like literally go there, and that's where now I'm going to take up my life.
Oh boy,
from here.
That's great. Well, talk about a physics problem. How are we going to figure that out?
Or a sci-fi movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. So
I'd watch that.
Good talk. See you out there.
Always good talking to you, Cass.
Have
Thanks,
a good week.
Man. Yeah, you too. See you next time.